Thank you. It's a delight to be here. So what we will present today is a report that we have worked together with Design Forum Finland on a perspective to understanding the potential future of design in Finland by looking at global demand for goods and how that is changing over time. And it's been something we have been working very hard on the last 5 years, actually. So we started this project already in 2016 with a first chapter. And then because of all kinds of changes in society, like Corona and so on, we decided to do another chapter in 2021. What we have done in really concrete terms is that during end of last year, we were meeting so-called leading-edge consumers around the globe, spending lots and lots of time with people just to understand how their values, attitudes are changing and what they are. And this we did in four different countries. And what we did, that we came up with some findings, and then we have also quantified that with quantitative studies and made projections and anticipated what is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So that is really the kind of subject of the report and our talk. So the stuff people want, and what is the future? What is the next step of what people want? And reflecting a little bit on Sari's presentation, I think our attitude about sustainability is really that people will not stop consuming, as Sari was also saying. People will continue to consume, but the way of consuming is morphing, and it can be a way of positively consuming that is more sustainable also in the future. The role in the report of Finland and design in Finland is that we haven't actually done a study in Finland, but we have interviewed experts in the field of design. And what we have basically done is that we have taken a look at the global demand and then critically studied whether Finland has an opportunity to drive change globally. So a very ambitious goal, to say the least. What we have learned from our more than 5 years experience of studying consumers around the globe, around what people are expecting from stuff and goods in the future, is the following development. So historically speaking, after the wars and so on, people didn't have too much, and we got really excited about kind of aggregating more. Consumption was a form of like psychological well-being. And we could see that, for instance, countries like Sweden, you got IKEA, you got H&M, that was really almost like riding that wave of people craving more. In 2016, when we studied this subject of what people are really expecting, we noticed that there is a way of talking about goods that is about selectivity. So in 2016, people became more selective. Okay, I'm not going to have all kinds of stuff in my home, but I will want to still have things, but I will going to be very careful of what I'm choosing. We also learned at that point in time that the cycles for decision making were quite long. So people were actually being more conscious about what they want to have. Nevertheless, it was still bloody clear consumption. It was just a more thoughtful way of consuming things. Now, when we went into the field 5 years later, we were super surprised because the picture had changed quite a lot. So what we are seeing now is something globally, and now we are talking also China, US, and so on. We see globally something which we call the sufficiency paradigm. Basically, it's about people recognizing that there is, at some point in time, there is an enough. I don't always need to have more. I need to learn to be more happy with what I have today. And what we are presenting today is basically describing what this sufficiency paradigm is. We We saw the development of a couple of different things. A story, a narrative of people's consumption that is, by the way, a positive story. We don't believe that people are going to change because we tell people to change. We don't believe that people will change because we are telling them that by not changing, it's a bad thing, you have to change. We think we need to find aspiration. We need to find a positive spin on things. So the story we see about people's relationship to consumption, and now we have studied especially goods, is that people try to recognize when they have enough. People try to become less dependent on material things. We heard a lot about, around the globe, people talking in these terms that, yeah, I want to really be certain that I need this thing. I'm not going to buy it just because I want to. So almost assuring yourself that it's really something that feeds a place in your life. A really clear finding also globally is that there is this kind of thin line when things in your life is kind of positive and when they become a burden. And people are super cautious about not creating a burden for themselves. And that's a lot of what we will talk about today, because the worst nightmare for many people is that you almost commit to something and then you recognize that I don't need this. It's actually a burden. I'm not going to use it. How do I get rid of it? And so on. And a part of the story also which is accelerated or really kind of something that we saw before but really has sped up because of the corona crisis is the connection to nature. And this is also where we see really an opportunity for design in Finland to do a new form of representations of something that is natural. And the last thing is also as a general tendency, we are seeing that in 2016, kind of a conscious consumption was a lot about small-scale community. And we are here in Berlin in our block here, we are doing like sharing things and so on. It was communal, it was community-based, it was small size. Now globally, people are expecting industrial-scale solutions. So suddenly, in our study, we had big global brands as clients as well. Suddenly, big global brands are seen in a quite positive way because many consumers realize that only big entities can make big changes. And I think even in Berlin, somebody told us that, okay, we can like have a perfect life here in Neukölln in Berlin, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We need to innovate in a larger scale. The report and what we will talk about here today is like we see 4 territories or opportunity spaces, and all of these are, we believe, fruitful spaces for design in Finland. There is actually innovation already happening in Finland in all of these different areas. But we hope that our report and the fact that we have studied this now so deeply can give you a little bit more ingredients and maybe confidence also in further doing innovation and so on. The first area is something which we call useful stuff. Sharon will talk much more about this. This is about an emphasis on post-purchase. Things should be useful and how brands should actually prove their value, not at selling things, but in supporting better use. The second territory which we see perhaps is kind of most challenging for Finland is actually that people need to be able to find joy in stuff. There is not a future that is non-material. Kerry might be of a different opinion later, but stuff around us should be joyful. And the third territory is this new interpretations of how goods and things that are being designed, how they can have a connection to nature in new and innovative ways. And the fourth one is something which we've called flowing stuff, which is the idea that you can temporarily feel that you're owning things, but you are seeing still that things should move in a flow, so you are not, as a consumer, the end of the process, but just like almost like a parking place. And before going deeper into these areas, I just want to kind of make the connection to sustainability. So we are not going to talk specifically about sustainability today, but our point is that all commercial opportunities that we see for innovation in the future are all embedded with sustainability, but they are kind of they are embedded in this. It's not sustainability per se that is the opportunity. So for useful stuff, it's really about repairability, longevity, super important. For joyful stuff, it's the matter of being able to consume in a joyful way, but not have a bad conscience, but actually do that in a good way. Stuff connecting to nature is biodiversity, feeling that things are not going against nature, but can be a part of nature. And the fourth area is really about circularity and how things can be a part of a flow. But we will talk more about each of these.
So let's jump right in with useful stuff. So what is useful stuff about? In 2016, we saw that people had already developed this idea that they wanted to have things in their lives that would last quite a long time, things they could use again. Repeat usage was very important. But at the same time, there were things that they were getting attached to. This usage brought an attachment, and an emotional attachment. And what we saw when we went back into the field last year is that this emotional attachment was fading away, and people were becoming more pragmatic about the use they made of things. It's good to have in my life while I'm using it, but actually, when I'm not using it anymore, I can get rid of it. I'm not attached. I don't feel the need to accumulate and have things in the cupboard that are not being used. So the usefulness is more important than the actual possession in this case. How something that can be used over time actually becomes part of the purchase process, that people are considering longer and harder what they're going to buy and the potential, the projection into the future and using the items in the future. Now this has enormous impacts for all aspects of design and products. Here we see part of the Raymond repair kit. We've seen huge movements around the right to repair in Europe, but also it's happening in the US, especially around technological goods. We see a variety of different initiatives across Europe. I can name a number of them, but one of them would be, for example, Group SEB in France, who have invested massively in guaranteeing all their small household electronics for 10 years and providing repair services for these products beyond 10 years, guaranteeing the availability of spare parts for 25 years. So this is already something that's in movement, but it's something that consumers want more and more. And it's actually moving into the way they think about products and purchasing products. So if we were to say there's an equation for value within this territory, we'd say, first of all, it's something that fits long-term use, so I can project into the fact that I'll use it a lot and for a long time. It's something that's going to be repairable. The materials then become important, because if it's got to last a long time, then the materials need to be of good quality, and we'll see more about this a little bit later. And of course, if it's versatile, if it can serve more than one purpose, that increases the likelihood that it will be in use for a longer period of time. So what does this mean for design in Finland? Well, the good news is there is already a very strong functional orientation in design in Finland, so this is a natural extension of this focus. But it does mean there needs to be a continued and renewed focus on innovation, quality, and the respect of materials. Even going to the point of wanting to take leadership in the EU on repairability would be a great thing to see, and long-term use. And we've got a bit of a checklist. What do you need to do? So these are the things you need to do to make things interesting. It's part of the storytelling, if you like. Communicate it well. Communicate to people how they can use goods in the best possible ways. Expand the earnings logics of your products to post-purchase earnings, not just the earnings at point of purchase. Innovate using materials that last. Support users to get the most out of the products. help them to imagine the long-term use at the point of purchase, remove the barriers by providing new kinds of warranties, and ensure that a smooth way for customers to pass products on once they are no longer in use. Think of the afterlife, because the customers are already thinking of that too. Well, what about joyful stuff? Well, joyful stuff is somewhere at the other end of the scale, but it's not. It's the perfect complement for useful stuff. Because we as people are rarely ever binary. We don't want one thing and somebody else wants another. We want a little bit of everything. So while we're building this inventory of very useful stuff that we keep for a long time, we still crave novelty. We still crave newness. We want the stimulation and the excitement of having something new in our life. And previously, we saw that there was a relationship to goods that was, the newness came from movement. It came from being mobile and agile. Unfortunately, the pandemic put a little bit of a hold on that, and people were obliged to stay in one place some more. So they started looking differently at the objects, and they started saying, I want to have joy in my life. So the objects in my life also need to bring joy. So we've got this balance between usefulness and joy that comes back into play. And things can also help our mental well-being. And people talked about being elevated by certain products that they had and they chose in their life. Now, the joyful stuff opportunity is to do what? It's to heighten everyday experience. It's not guilt-generating. So people are not excusing superfluous behavior and superfluous purchases here. They're actually saying, I want to be careful all the same, so I don't want it to make me feel guilty because I'm buying something that's bad for the environment. But they still want it to be the latest and new, so they're looking for innovation, and they want it to enhance their mood. Now, I'm not going to spend very much time on this because I'd feel a bit silly talking about digital substitutes when we've got an expert in the room, so I'll allow Kerry to do that when we finish. But digital substitution starts to have a lot of sense in this space, where people want something new, but they don't want to feel guilty. They want to have the excitement of trying something on or seeing how they look, but they don't want to be accumulating things that they may not keep for a very long time. So what does it mean for design in Finland? Well, in Finland, as we said, there's a great focus on function, and that's fantastic. But there may be a little bit too much reductionism. Maybe sometimes we're missing the joy. So we said it needs to be a focus on the idea of multisensorial design. It's not just the look, but the touch, the feel, the sound. Take it in all of the senses. And also focus on the possibility of digital substitutes. So we want to, on the checklist, elevate people's everyday, see your products as levers for mood enhancement. We want to plan for all the senses, create ways to experience new and exciting without feeling guilty about consumption, use all channels available when engaging with customers, and experiment with digital substitution. What about stuff connecting to nature? Now, back in 2016, there were a lot of countries that were still in the shadow of the global economic crisis, for those of you who remember it. 2008 to 2010 was a bit of a rough period. And at that point in time, people started relating to things through connections to people, and we saw the importance of local coming back into play, a beginning of a movement away from globalization and more a focus on, can I support local businesses? And we saw that again coming back into play during COVID. On top of that, that hasn't disappeared, but what we're seeing is people want to see themselves in an additional context. So connecting to people, but also connecting to nature. So you're enlarging, making the circle larger and seeing yourself in the context of a world, an environment, nature being a fundamental part of this. And we're seeing an opportunity that is about an aspiration to define oneself as part of, not on the outside of, not things being for me, but actually being a part of me and me a part of them. So connecting to nature is about having, obviously, low environmental impact. That's something that people are looking at within this opportunity area. It's about being basic and ordinary. Now that might sound boring, but actually it's also very interesting because it's part of this idea of blending in. And also, as Oskar will explain to you in the next opportunity, it's very important when we want to move things on, when we want to pass things on, that they haven't been hyper-personalized. You want things that are timeless, because nature is also timeless. And materials that have a good energy. Now people say, what does it mean, materials that have a good energy? Well, this is the way people are talking about products today. They talk about products that are made of natural materials as materials that have a good, strong, positive energy, that have vibrations. They're materials they want to have around them and close to them. One of the areas they want them close are to their body. And we have a lot of people talking to us about the properties of natural materials, how they have antibacterial properties, how they help them to stay cool, stay warm, how they are easier to dispose of in an environmentally friendly way when they have to move on. So people are again thinking about how the materials of the various different things they bring into their life actually connect back to nature and can return back to nature when they're finished. So for design in Finland, what is there here? We see there's an opportunity for a new interpretation of being inspired by nature. So it's not just about having things that have natural forms, but it's also about the idea that nature has strengths. Nature has its own mechanisms, and these mechanisms are basis also for innovation. Learn from nature to bring new solutions to society, new natural materials. There are some natural materials that are not so good for the environment. So what are the new natural materials that we can bring in to replace these? And a move from compensation to regeneration, which we feel is also super important. Customers are not so impressed by compensation anymore. They're looking for things that actually rebuild. So this idea of being able to build back, rebuild, grow back is becoming quite important in the way the consumers we've been speaking to are imagining the future. So on our checklist, look to nature and science for innovation. Rethink and reinvent processes around regeneration rather than compensation. Explore the new business models that integrate community and nature into the core of your business. Keep focus on new sustainable materials, show new ways to apply these materials in end-user products, and be more thoughtful about using rare or scarce virgin resources. And now flowing back to Oskar.
Okay, then last of the 4 territories we call flowing stuff, and this is a little bit strange to be talking about, because what you will think in your head is that, okay, now they are introducing circular consumption as a new idea in this event, and that's really the point. So we have, during our lives, we have studied consumers around the globe for numerous years. And this is now the point in history for the first time that people are actually thinking of themselves as being a part of a circular consumption model. So in 2016, sustainability was still a little bit a form of like social responsibility engagement. Now the opportunity that is in the core of sustainability is a very practical attitude about realizing that you are a part of a flow. So everything I consume comes from somewhere and it goes somewhere after I have consumed it. And this is not revolutionary as a thought, but it's revolutionary that this opportunity exists now. We are, for instance, talking about something that we call temporary ownership as a model that is quite aspirational for people. So the idea that you can actually own things, but there is a way out, way out of it in a convenient and quick way. And here the equation for value is partly similar attributes in the previous one. Basic and ordinary comes up here because, I mean, if something should move in a flow, it cannot be very personalized. It cannot just be for me. It needs to be something that is valuable for many people. It obviously needs to be something that you can pass on. And there's also ideas about sharing economy in this, and also aspects of making things more digital and virtual. Interesting, however, in our study, the kind of ideas about sharing economy was also actually quite much criticized around the globe, because people have seen also sharing models being misused in many countries. For example, people living in Shanghai or Beijing have, during their everyday life, they have seen massive amounts of bicycles being thrown in streets and so on. So we have actually quotes of people both in Germany and China saying that sharing economy is the most wasteful model there is. So there's something beautiful also with the idea of owning things, because people think that when you own things, you are also taking responsibility of things. So thinking about design in Finland, the kind of interesting thing here is the functional aspect again about the heritage in Finland. So how can we think about things that we are designing as a system where you actually have multiple owners and it's not being planned only for one user? We feel also that in order to this flowing stuff to really happen, there is going to the requirement is that there's going to be a lot of multidisciplinary collaboration with both the public sector and commercial sector and different fields of science, because this is really about innovating a new way of consuming. Of course, we have secondhand, we have established models within this, but this could be so much more. And we think also that in order to make the flow better, so stuff would really move in the flow, digital technologies will also help a lot in this. So the checklist. So plan for a series of buyers rather than one. Innovate new ways in how products can maintain its value. How we are thinking about this is that clothing, for instance, could in the next 3 to 5 years, and partly are already, be investments. So you are not actually seeing them as a cost. You have, for temporary ownership, you are investing in something, and then you will get your money back when you are not using it anymore. Continue to explore second-hand. A lot happens on a global scale in second-hand, and I think the change is just that how do you make this so irresistible that it actually becomes a better option than new? And in some segments, it's already like that, because in second-hand, you don't have to carry the burden of using new virgin resources and so on. But there's a lot of potential in second-hand, although it kind of feels that it might be already solved. And here also, like, where we would really like to stress also companies in Finland to be super ambitious, do things like this on an industrial scale, because that's what the consumers are going to expect. And also, as a community, design in Finland could also push the legislation. So there could really be incentives in order for people to consume in this new way. This is not going to be solved by individual actors in the system, but there needs to be a systemic change. So that was the 4 different areas that we had identified after this. It sounds very simple when you are presenting it, but there's been a lot of work happening to land on this. And some of you might reflect on this, that, okay, we were all aware of these. I just want to emphasize that these are fact-based, validated mass market opportunity on a global scale. So we haven't presented anything here that is not going to be massive business in the next 3 to 5 years. We can see all kinds of things kind of happening on a longer time scale, but we have chosen not to talk about that here today. So we can see a major movement in consumption towards something which is about sufficiency, but an aspirational way of consuming in sufficient ways. And we are very happy that we can see this, because you could see something completely different also. There are 4 significant opportunities: useful stuff, joyful stuff, connecting to nature, flowing stuff. And when we have done this global study and reflected on design in Finland, we think that there are a lot of like pillars or elements that we have embedded in our culture and a way of thinking about design in Finland. That doesn't mean that we can just like lay down and wait, because this is also providing a challenge to push forward on certain aspects, and we will talk about them still later today. That was our presentation before time.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Very, very interesting. I also very much like the idea of, I think you had a different word for it, but this idea of satisfaction, or the kind of enough paradigm, you know, away from that old shop till you drop, and, you know, the idea, because a lot of research into happiness also is at a certain point, more stuff doesn't make you happy, it just makes you unhappier. So thank you very much. We're going to open up the floor and online for questions. And I see already we have a question in the back there. We'll just wait for the microphone. I think it's the very back there. If you could put your hand up. Yeah, so the mic can, yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much. Super exciting. I was wondering, what is the role of symbolic consumption in relation to these territories, opportunity areas that you find? We know that consumers want to make social and cultural distinction. We want to manifest who we are. So what did you find out?
I think this basically what we're presenting are 4 different versions of symbolic forms of consumption. It's not that, I mean, although we might, for instance, say that consumers become more pragmatic, for example, that's still a way of showing who you are. It's not pragmatism in its purest form. It's still an identity game in that sense. So what we have been seeing during the last 5 years, it's simply like the way people are basically communicating about themselves via consumption is changing. It's just new symbols and new ways of portraying who you are.
Yeah, I would back that up and say that, you know, we know that consumers have become very smart about marketing. So they see through a lot of the previous generation marketing messages. And they are reshaping themselves with more agency around how they want to be seen and described as consumers. So useful stuff is, you know, a smart way of consuming. You're defining yourself as a smart consumer because not only you're doing things that are good for the environment, but you're also doing things that are good for your pocketbook, you know, or your wallet, whatever way we want to call that. But you're actually showing people that you're thinking, you're reflecting about what you're doing. And, you know, we could play that out for each one of the 4 areas. There is a symbolic value for each one that differentiates the consumer from others if that's what they want.
Thank you. Good answer, or good answers. Do we have more questions from the floor or online? Was that a question or just a wave? I think it was just a wave.
A microphone.
We do have a question. Yes, yeah. Please.
Thanks a lot. It was really good presentation, and I totally agree what you have. About the product obsolescence, I think that is one big issue in here, and I want to hear your opinion. I mean, there are different kind of obsolescences nowadays. That physical obsolescence, that doesn't happen too much because the electronics and others, the reliability have and the quality is high. But the real obsolescence actually happens nowadays is software obsolescence, of course, that they don't support anymore and you can upgrade. Even television, 17% of people are changing their television because they can't update the software anymore. But the main question basically that what is your view on psychological obsolescence? that people just get bored, you know. They want to have the faster, shiner, newer, and that kind of things. And some products are taking care of that with personalization and customization and other, but I haven't seen that too much. What is your opinion on here?
I think that you've touched on something that's super important, and we sort of mentioned that when we come into the idea of joyful stuff, that people do still want the stimulation of something new. We've come to live with that and come to expect that. I think we're just looking at it differently. And trying to find that in different ways. So one of the things that we heard is, for example, people talking about using nature as a therapy to detoxify from overconsumption. So first of all, a recognition that this desire for something new and different is actually perceived by people as almost a drug, and they want to get over this addiction. So that's one part of it. And then the other is looking for digital substitutes in certain cases. So how can I refresh and get new ideas? You know, there are much worse habits than that. Sharing with somebody the other day the new Instagram trend, which is I'm going to order a product, some clothing, I'm going to have it delivered, I'm going to try it on, I'm going to take a photograph of it, I'm going to post it on Instagram, and then I'm going to send the product back. That would be a very toxic, if you like, way of satisfying that need for something new. But we do see that people are trying to find different ways of dealing with that desire for newness. I don't think it's going to go away. I think we need to find new solutions to satisfy that desire, because after all, the consumer industry, if you like, has created that craving and that desire over the last 50 years. So part of helping people to manage it will be providing alternative, more sustainable solutions. And transitioning. Transitioning is everything. Oskar, you might want to add something on that.
No. And maybe one thing I could say is just like, of course, we're going to lay down this territory, and we have like evidence that there is like demand emerging. None of these are like unproblematic. None of these are like not filled with tensions, because like there's always a consumer that is kind of a dealing with these kinds of tensions, and yeah.
And of course, it goes without saying that secondhand is one of those ways of doing that. It's getting something new that isn't new. You're getting something that's already been used. You're not bringing raw, new virgin resource into the system, but you're actually satisfying your personal desire for something new.
And it has I remember one respondent that was in Canada who like just reflected herself that how is the experience so different if I go into a second-hand store and a new like fast fashion store, where I feel just like, you know, way down in the fast fashion store. I don't feel any sort of joy, but suddenly when I'm in the second-hand, I'm kind of uplifted, and it's kind of unproblematic in somehow. And that's obviously because you are not having that kind of attention in the second-hand store.
Yeah, but it's good for the environment and the pocketbook usually, and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah. So it's like unproblematic for people in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And do we have time for one more question? Quick one. Do we have a quick question? Who wants to say that they have a quick... The mic is running over.
Thank you. It has been really inspiring. I have a question related to you're showing that there is a direct direction towards the sustainable consumption, but at the same time, the companies at the moment are quite risk assertive, and they are not using innovation as a source of, sustainability as a source of innovation. So what is your message to the companies for today, in order for them to rethink their business logic? Is there room for like the traditional ownership of goods in the future? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I think that especially in Finland, and hopefully I don't offend anybody, but we have a tendency of looking at sustainability and circularity in a very kind of production-oriented way, almost that, okay, if we have the facilities to handle like textile, like and fabrics and so on. We have the whole industrial flow like sorted out. Then we have done the work. So even to the extent like demand is not being talked about. It's not, it's almost that is there a market even for sustainability? That's not even touched upon. So that's why we think that there is a need to look at this by not using the word sustainability, but understanding how demand is changing. And you will find that there is like sustainability demand, but just in other words and in other ways, in ways that can be aspirational. I think the worst thing of marketing sustainability is not to innovate the whole language around this, because it just weighs people down how we are talking about this.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And we will have you back again for the second part of our program.